For this week, Parsha's Chayei Sara, I'd like to share a very powerful Dvar Torah, both in its content of what the message is, as well as the context, who said it and when this Dvar Torah was said. This was said by the Piasetzner Rebbe, whose name was Reb Klonimus Kalman Shapiro, who was the Rav of the Warsaw Ghetto when the Nazis in Hashem gathered all the Jews of Warsaw, and most met their terrible end, as well as the Piasetzner Rebbe himself and his whole family. They were killed out by the Nazis in Hashem. In the Warsaw Ghetto, he was actually the rabbi, and in the Shabbosim that they were able to gather together over there, he would give speeches, and he was the face and figure of Torah and of spirituality, and he was the Rav during these final days of Warsaw Jewry. And with this background in mind, it adds much more weight and passion and heart to this Dvar Torah that he shared. In Parsha's Chayei Sara, the Torah accounts that Sara passed away at 127 years, when she was 127 years old. Previously, right before that, at the end of last week's Parsha, the Torah tells that there was the Akedas Yitzchak. Hashem tested Avram to bring Yitzchak up on top of the mountain, to bring him as a sacrifice, and obviously it was a test. When Avram brought him up and was about to slaughter his son for the sake of God, Hashem said, I was just testing you, and this proves how faithful you are to me, as the famous story goes. What's the connection between that part of the Parsha and Sarah's passing away? So Rashi says, it's because Sara, when she heard the news that her son was literally almost slaughtered, it was too much for her to bear, and her soul ascended to its maker, and her soul went up on high to Hashem, and she passed away. So the Piasetzner Rebbe quoted the Reb Menachem Mendel of Rimanov, who brought a Gemara. In the Gemara, in the Talmud, it says that salt is compared to suffering. Salt brings out the juice and the flavor of the meat and makes it taste better. The word bris, covenant, is written by salt in the Torah, bris melach, and bris is also written by suffering, and when negative things happen. What's the comparison? So the Gemara says, just like salt brings out the flavor of the meat and makes it more flavorful, so too suffering brings out the flavor of people. It cleans up his sins and brings out the essence of the soul, brings out the depth of a person's soul, and these are, so to say, the perks that happen with suffering, just like what happens with salt. However, says the Rebbe Rebbe, sometimes let's follow the comparison and let's make it very consistent. If you salt meat properly, it tastes very good, but too much salt ruins the meat. So too, maybe a little bit of suffering or challenges here and there bring out our best, but too much suffering spoils the meat. And at some point we say, Ad Kan, this is too much. Hence, Sara passed away. The fact that Moshe put in the Torah, Sarah's passing next to Akedas Yitzchak, was to advocate for the Jewish people that sometimes, Hashem, we are people. We are soft, we are flesh and blood, and we can't handle everything. And sometimes the suffering and the news is too much. And the what you're trying to prove with the suffering, God, has run stale. Hence, Sara passed away. As a Piasetzner Rebbe is sharing this on Shabbos to the Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto, he says, we could also say a little bit similarly, that Sara was sharing a protest to God. Her passing was actually an act of protest, saying, Hashem, I cannot handle this. Enough. This can't go on, and I'm done. And it was that act of protest which the Torah tells us, Shnei Chayei Sara, that she lived 127 years, and that was her life. In other words, it was almost cut short. And Sara let her soul expire from her body as a way of saying, I can't take this anymore. And again, understanding what the Jews were going through in World War II at that time when this Dvar Torah was shared just adds so much passion, heart, and soul to this. When the Piasetzner Rebbe, before he shared this, his whole family was killed out 2 months earlier. And you could imagine the passion of Hashem, this is just too much. At some point, if we're in a real relationship with Hashem, and if we actually believe in Hashem, this I think is the main point, then we could sometimes protest to Him. And we could be upset at Him. And we could say, God, that was too much. And if I can't do that, then I'm not in a real relationship with Him. Imagine you have a teacher, you have a parent, you're not allowed to be angry with me. What type of insecure parent is that? What type of insecure teacher is that? If I'm in a real, authentic relationship, I really believe in Hashem, I'm really connected to Hashem, then all emotions are on the table. I believe in you, Hashem. I'm a follower of yours, Hashem. But this was too much. Ad Kan, I cannot handle this. And Sarah's death was a protest to Hashem. Sometimes suffering is too unbearable, both in Sarah's case and as well as in the case of the Warsaw Ghetto. And this is obviously a very powerful, very raw, and very pertinent lesson that we could all take. The Rebbe would say that we need to force Hashem's hand, so to say Ad Masai, enough, we're crushed of Galus. We are done with this. Who am I to tell that to Hashem? Hashem is infinite. You're His child. If we're Hashem's child, we're allowed to express emotion to Him. And when it hurts, you could scream out. This isn't a challenge to faith. This doesn't diminish your faith. On the contrary, it only shows the depth and the reality of one's faith, that Hashem is real enough to you that you could actually express to Him when things are wrong. And it doesn't mean that you need to be a less observant, less serving Jew. This is part of the relationship, and actually sometimes only enhances faith. I'll share something that has happened with a student of mine who had a rough time davening. And one time I poked him about it a little bit by a Farbrengen, and he shared with me that someone he was close to passed away after davening for this person for so long. So he has a cold shoulder. He doesn't really daven much anymore. I said, hold on, I want you tomorrow, when you daven, turn to Hashem and say, Hashem, I davened for this person and they passed away. What the heck? You killed them. And he seemed taken aback. Sure enough, after Yom Kippur, I get a message from this boy who I didn't know if my words reached their mark. And he said, I want you to know, if you're not sure what you accomplished this past month, you've accomplished that someone that has a very salty relationship with Judaism and with Hashem. By Ne'ilah, I said, Hashem, I'm going to put my beef with you on the side. I'm going to face you, and I'm going to say, what the heck, as the gates are closing, because I'm in this relationship. I know you're there. I know you listen to me. So why didn't you answer me? And this is a noble way to daven. When things are too much, Hashem wants us to call it out and say, it's too much. And that only helps bring the reality, bring it out better. There's a beautiful, haunting, and just real and raw story from Elie Wiesel, who shares in the death camps in Auschwitz. One day, in the night or in the afternoon, I've heard different accounts of this, 3 rabbis find shrouds, find rags. They put them on like talesim, and they say, we're taking Hashem to court to see if He's guilty for all the suffering He's bringing to the Jewish people. And they sit there and they debate, God, you chose the Jews as your chosen people, but they're literally being decimated in the worst possible way in World War II, and you're doing nothing about it. And they weighed the pros and cons. Is God guilty over here? And sure enough, after however long they discuss this, Elie Wiesel recounts, he says, the javel on the table, we have decided, a psak din, Hashem is guilty, and this can't be happening. But we need to convene this beis din because we need to daven mincha. We have a father relationship with Hashem. We have a king relationship with Hashem. Hashem's our king. We serve Him. We're wholehearted servants. But Hashem's our Father, and He actually loves us, and He wants to hear from us. And a father could, if a son's in pain, a father can hear that. And it doesn't diminish the fact that we're also His servants, because we're also His children. And somehow this duality always existed in the Jewish heart. And just tying it back to our life and our times that we live in now, Baruch Hashem, we don't live in those times. But on the one hand, we need to serve Hashem with joy and with wholehearted faithfulness. On the other hand, we could tell Hashem, Ad Kan, well, what's this game? We've been in Galus for 2,000 years. Yeah, the anti-Semites come, they go up, they go down, they go up, they go down. You want us to stay in exile so that our essence comes revealed, and you see how faithful we are to you. You've done it, and it runs stale. And then salt makes it flavorful, but how much salt can you put on until it just kills the meat? As the Rebbe would say also, that Hashem's hiding for us to find Him. So Sunday we're going to look, Monday we're going to look. There's going to come a time where we stop looking. So Hashem, Ad Kan, Ad Masai, we should all realize that we could, so to say, take Hashem to task and really, really express ourselves, which could look like frustration. And Hashem expects dveikus, connection with us. Connection means I could express love, I could express frustration, there's no clash, and I'm in a real, authentic relationship. And may Hashem answer us, answer our cries, put an end to all of our suffering, and bring Mashiach now.